A first novel that may be drawing on Lord of the Flies for inspiration, or perhaps Genesis, and a book of poems about love, identity, struggle, pain, and all the things that go along with love. Hello and welcome back to Bookish, and welcome to another video in which I'm going to be reviewing this time two books that were nominated for the 2025 Polari First Book Prize. One of the unique things about the Polari First Book Prize is that about the Polari Prize is that when it was being given, it acknowledged books of all kinds of genres. So books of short stories, novels, poems, nonfiction, and my intention here is to read all of those books because that prize is being given this year because of a controversy involving the Polari Prize, which I have described down in the show notes down below. But I don't want to spend time talking about that controversy here. I just want to talk about the books. And the first one of the two books I'm going to review today is Spoilt Creatures by Amy Twigg. So this is a really interesting book. In almost every way a book can be interesting. It's interesting in its characters, interesting in its setting, it's interesting in its theme, it's interesting in its writing and the images it creates, it's interesting in its structure. In that it is kind of being told by our main character narrator looking back on events from a decade earlier. And in the lead into this, I said that it may draw its inspiration from, William Golding's Lord of the Flies or from the book of Genesis. I kind of happen to think it's both. But it is I think, a disturbing, unsettling, effective first novel, even though there are things about it that I didn't think worked completely. So, wouldn't be, one of the highest rated books for me, but I do think it's a really interesting book and one that, I hope is widely read because I do think its disturbing nature and the question that's asked will be really interesting. So as I've been doing in these videos is I have been just kind of reading the notes I make to myself as my first impressions as reading the book. So literally these are just notes I take as I'm going through the book. So I think I'll read those to you as I did with Mongrels, which of the three books I've read so far that were nominated for the Polari Prize First Book, I like Mongrels better than these two. That doesn't mean they're just bad books, but I want to read these first impressions of Spoilt Creatures to you. Iris is lost. Her boyfriend broke up with her and she's back living with her mother. A friend tells her of a commune women's therapy home, and she goes and becomes embroiled in the lives and weirdness of the commune, its leader, and its way of life. The time is ominous, the writing evocative and layered with symbolic passages, particularly spoilage and evisceration. There's a lot about spoilage here. The plot drags a bit and feels like it takes forever to get started, but there are just enough instances of tension and mystery to keep it going. However, with 100 pages left, I feel like I know where it's going to go and how it will get there. Definitely seems like a book about violence in all forms, mostly emotional, that men enact on women, but women in this book are far from perfect, and there's definitely a secret at the heart of what's going on this women's commune. The menace within the house comes from the other women, even though precipitated by events involving men. If a book is plot-driven and the plot is predictable, where does the reader go next? Characters, these seem kind of archetypal, that's true. Theme, okay, but seems, to be focused on this kind of violence and creating this idea of disquiet and disturbance. The writing is effective and awesome, good. The pacing, last 100 pages fly after a sluggish start. There's a lot of Lord of the Flies happening here, and I said the book is good. So what happens is, as I detailed here, our main character, Iris, finds herself in this kind of women's commune located on the coast of England somewhere. I'm sorry, I don't have the geography exactly right in my head. And they live on this kind of farm that is isolated from the nearest community, near to the community where Iris's mother lived, but isolated from that community just enough so that what goes on there is not widely known. The women of the commune are known in the community. They're kind of looked down on, scoffed at. Occasionally they are the subjects of curiosity, and people think there's something weird about what's going on. These women live in this commune, they grow their own food, they all have to do this work, and we get all these images of the food they grow and things that are rotting and animals that have been eviscerated and the house they live in, which is kind of falling apart, and we get these relationships between the women. Iris is infatuated with a woman who she met who lives in the commune, and that woman is, borderline abusive. I think it's interesting to think about this woman perhaps taking on and being kind of symbolic of the way in which abusive men can be abusive to women in real life, and kind of mimicking that. The leader of this commune is a woman, I believe her name is Blythe, who literally is a godlike figure in the book. This is where I get the idea of Genesis, and this commune where they live is the Garden of Eden, and evil is introduced into that garden when one of the members of the commune violates the rules and invites men to come to the commune while Blythe is away. And this then precipitates a series of events which cause all kinds of problems, lead to violence, destruction, etc., which I'll leave up to you to read. But I do think it's a good book. I do think it's worth reading. It, as I said earlier, to me it doesn't rise to the level of Mongrel, but I do think it's a good book, an interesting book, a disturbing book, a well-crafted, well-written, well-thought-out book. But it's probably not going to be, it already is not my favorite book from the Polari Prize first book list. Okay, so the second book I want to review here is Impossible Heat by Ciara Maguire. This is a book of poems, and really it describes itself as a pamphlet. I think it's only 34 pages. Most of the poems in the collection are 1.5 pages long. The formatting of those poems probably makes them stretch out longer than the reading actually implies. They are creatively formatted in that sometimes the words kind of snake along the page. Sometimes they read more like prose, where instead of having full stops and breaks in the line, you have backslashes to indicate the spaces between lines. So there's some real creativity, I think, and attempt to create a rhythm of reading in the way in which the poems are structured, which I think works really well. The poems almost exclusively deal with the lesbian experience of love, self-loathing, abuse, etc., all the things that kind of go on, or that at least I assume from the point of view of our author have been experienced, or experienced sometimes by lesbians. I think one of the things that's unfair about reviewing a book of short stories or a book of poems, and everybody says this, is that not all the poems work for every reader, and that's certainly true for me. I thought some of the poems were quite good. I think my favorite two were How to Leave, which I wrote is well structured and feels relatable even if you've never left the person you love, because it's about leaving a relationship. And then Domestic Horror Show, which the name is pretty well describes it. I wrote it's very good, disturbing in its specificity. And the rhythm of those poems works for me. And it's not just a matter of whether or not the poem works for me thematically, whether it touches me, whether it provokes some kind of reaction, but to me also the way in which the poem reads, the rhythm which you can read it. I think that matters a lot in a book of poetry. And again, unfortunately, not all these poems worked as well for me as others. I thought, for instance, Queen's Park Cruising Ground felt forced, and its ending was a little bit trite. It's a poem involving women literally looking for women to hook up with. I thought one of the things I really liked about the poetry and poems in general was that they all seem to wrap up with like a concluding line or a concluding set of lines, kind of like in that final couplet in a Shakespearean sonnet, which I found to be kind of effective. And I found oftentimes it brought a poem which I may not have been following along with or may not have understood together really well. And so the poems end, I think, on a really powerful and oftentimes less ambiguous place, than lots of poems did. And I enjoyed reading it. Do I like it better than I like Mongrel? No. Do I like it better than I liked Spoilt Creatures, the other book which I just reviewed here? Probably not, but I might reread it and see, because it won't take me very long to reread it, and sometimes poems you have to read more than once, I think, to really feel what they're about. But again, both these books I think are well worth reading. I was able to get the Kindle edition of Impossible Heat for I want to say $4, because I think that's the price because it is incredibly short. And so I thought that was well worth the investment, and rereading those poems again won't be a big deal. I really would hope I've seen other people mention Spoilt Creatures on their channels. Looking forward to their reviews of this book, because I have a feeling that it's open to interpretation in lots of different ways. Anyway, there you go. There are my reviews of Spoilt Creatures by Amy Twigg and Impossible Heat by Ciara Maguire, 2 books that were nominated for the Polari First Book Prize this year. If you've read these, have any thoughts about what I've said here, please leave your comments in the comment section below, and as always, thank you for watching.